The federal government has not shown any serious commitment to the development of the public universities and honoring of agreements with university-based unions. SSANU is losing patience with the federal government as a result of her insensitive posture with respect to the welfare and well-being of SSANU members and the university system. SSANU has employed all known peaceful means and tactics aimed at making the federal government to honor and implement the various agreements and memorandum of understanding reached with the unions to avert the looming danger, but all to no avail. Therefore, the union is left with no other option than to totally, completely, comprehensively, and indefinitely shut down the universities.
While activities in Nigerian universities are threatening to come to a grinding halt as a result of this new threat, this new impending strike threat being given by SSANU and NASU. Just in case you're wondering what those abbreviations stand for, Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities, SSANU, and Non-Academic Staff Union of Allied and Educational Institutions is NASU. Well, this is happening as ASU is still on its extended 2-month warning strike, giving the federal government more time to meet the obligations which it's promised it in its 2019 agreement. What exactly is the bone of contention here, and what will be the way forward, given that by March 27, that's the date they've given, if nothing happens for these unions, they have threatened to down tools indefinitely? Well, we have with us here this morning Comrade Mohammed Ibrahim, who is a National President, Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning. Thanks for having me, Murphy. Let me clarify that first. You're threatening to go down tools indefinitely if nothing happens by March 27th. Is that correct?
We are threatening to down tools for a warning strike of 2 weeks in the first instance.
Okay.
If by midnight of 27th, which is a Sunday, nothing is done towards what we have agreed with government.
So you're not on strike now as we speak?
No, we are not.
Some people will say, why should we be worried about that? After all, the primary people in charge of teaching have been on strike. So it's not like as if you're able to teach the students in place of them. Why should Nigerians be worried about this particular threat?
Well, you know, the university is a system.
True. And
it operates with 4 university-based unions. Ours is the non-teaching arm. And as you may be aware, we occupy a very strategic position in the system running the university. We are the administrators. We are populated by professionals who run the system: engineers, medical doctors, nurses, you know, the security arm of the university, the accountants paying salaries, the ICT experts who deploy, you know, and allow the system to run, even the teaching system. So Nigerians should be worried, because without these 2 very important unions, the university cannot run at all.
Well, what exactly is the basis of the strike? I mean, what exactly is the basis of the threat this time around?
Well, Maupe, is a very long story. but I will try to summarize it. This is all a product of failure of or non-performance or keeping to promises by the federal government of Nigeria. In 2009, the federal government of Nigeria signed an agreement with the 4 university-based unions, SSANU, NASU inclusive, a copy of which I have here with me. And in these agreements, there were things that were reached at, we agreed with government, payment of certain allowances, improvement in conditions of service to our members, and the like. And the agreement also has in it renegotiation after every 3 years. Now, 12 years down the line, less than 40% of this agreement has seen the light of the day. And within the period under review, a lot of issues were discussed at different fora with government officials. And to fast forward to October 2020, we had a 2 weeks warning strike, and government invited us. That was after the deployment of the IPPIS payment solution, taking over the payment of salaries of members of the university community. Now, we realized that our members were suffering untold hardship in getting their salaries paid, not only as at when due, but even having it fractured and dismembered, because registrars, bursars, administrators ended up collecting salaries of drivers, cleaners being paid salaries of vice chancellors, and so on and so forth. So the whole system was modeled up. And some people stayed 2, 3, 4 months, up to 6 months without salaries. And the issues, became unabating.
Is that as a result of the introduction of this new payment system?
The IPPIS, exactly. And also to give a background, when government tried to introduce the IPPIS system, the 4 university-based unions initially rejected. But after discussions with government, and they made us to understand that the IPPIS solution was to curb corruption and ensure efficiency in the system. And because we're administrators, we felt that we should buy into this project. And even after highlighting to government the peculiarities of the universities, because the university system runs differently from the way the public service and the civil service, runs. Therefore, we thought that we could have a gentleman agreement, and having seen that they demonstrated that they were going to take care of those such peculiarities, but only to be disappointed, just 1 or 2 months later. Now, we decided to make our complaints through the due process, writing to government, intimating them of these hiccups. And we had a meeting with them. A committee was set up, inclusive of people from the IPPIS office, the National Salaries and Wages Commission, the office of the head of civil service of the Federation, the office of the Accountant General, and the unions. But as I'm talking to you, less than 20% of such problems have been solved. Still, our members are still having these issues of non-payment of certain allowances, which they are entitled to. Outside that, also had the issues of the non-payment of the minimum wage arrears. When government, enacted the law of the new minimum wage in 2019, the university sector, or generally the education sector, made up of the colleges of education, polytechnics, and the universities, were not paid or enrolled immediately into the minimum wage, new minimum wage. And it took about 9 or 10 months before the new minimum wage was effected. And up toward till today, the arrears of such 10 months have not been paid. And we have met with government severally. Committees were formed. We have discussed with them. Statistics were given. Collation was made from the polytechnics, from the universities, and the colleges of education. As I'm talking to you, that minimum wage arrears has not been paid after several promises. Now, outside that, we also complain about our members who work in the state universities. You know, it has become a new normal. You know, some state governors now coming up, establishing universities left, right, and center in order to, you know, maybe appease the people from their villages. You see a state having 3 or 4 state universities, which is totally unnecessary, because even the ones that are existent are not even catered for. Now, our members in such state universities will have 6 months, up to 1 year. For example, in Edo State, Ambrose Ali University, our members have been there for close to 1 year. They have not been paid salaries. You know,
1 year?
Yes. And these people have parents. They have families. They cater for the families.
Is there a reason for that?
They tell you that government doesn't give them money. And that you know that education is a social service. You know, tuition is not paid. So we have such issues with the proprietors of state universities. Outside that also, we have complaints about usurpation of duties of the non-teaching staff by the academic staff.
Okay,
yes.
that's a yes. complex one.
Yes, we realize that our jobs are being poached in the guise of what is called committee system. For example, you have a works department in every university. It's a directorate with a director and with retinue of staff. But you realize that some friends of the vice chancellors are appointed to run water distribution, diesel distribution, taking charge of generators. The jobs of the director of works is completely taken. I give you an example of one funny situation in Nnamdi Azikiwe University, where you have a professor appointed to take charge of university transport system, leaving his primary assignment to be pursuing drivers at the park when you have other things to do. You know, issues about issuing permits to students to get hostel accommodation, getting mattresses, you know, and then...
I thought that was under the Dean of Student Affairs.
That is under the Deanery of the Students' Affairs. But you also have Director of Students' Affairs in some universities. You have deputy registrars in charge of such duties. But all these things are gradually being taken over. Because what is academic about water distribution in a campus? When you have somebody who has read engineering, and you have somebody who is appointed as head of water section in the works department, you know, being paid salary to do that job, but not allowed to do.
So the issues are a plethora. But
yes.
If you ask me, and you know, in terms of priority and the most important, some people will talk about the salaries, the fact that people have not been, they're not being paid their just and fair wages as a result of the new IPIS system that has been deployed. And also the question of arrears of minimum wage that have not been paid across many universities. I mean, you talk about a 10-month arrears. But a lot of the other issues, some people will say that, you know, the federal government might not be able to intervene because it would seem that SSANU, in this case, is an umbrella body for all the universities, whether they be state government owned or be they federal government owned.
Yeah.
But we know that the employers are different, and it's going to be very difficult for the federal government to be able to force, for instance, the state governments to buy into or to solve the problems at the same pace that they are going to be solving their own problems as well, if you get what I'm trying to say.
Yes, yes.
For instance, we know that IPIS is something that has been deployed by the federal government. The state universities might not have that problem.
Yeah.
So how do you intend to unpack this problem in such a way that it makes for easy negotiation and resolution by the parties involved?
Well, from what I have listed to you, there are problems that involve the federal universities and those of the state universities. But generally, the universities are established through a license they get from NUC. So therefore, the operations of universities should be uniform. What is obtained in the federal university should be what is in the state universities. So if, for example, issues about allowances that are paid to staff in the federal universities, they also should pay the same in the state universities. That is the normal. The vice chancellors, the registrars, bursars, and all members of staff in the state universities get the same salary and allowances from those, the same with those in the federal universities. That is how it operates.
The NUC does not have that as part of its regulation, does it? Does it stipulate that salaries and wages and allowances must be uniform in both federal and state universities?
Every advert that you see for employment in federal and state universities is customized to read that salaries or appointments are made as contained in the, the university laws. Universities have laws.
Indeed.
Yes.
Are their laws uniform?
Well, they may not be totally uniform, but there are about 80% of the laws pertaining the operations of universities are same.
So I understand, for instance, I mean, we also face this problem when it comes to the healthcare system. The healthcare system is on the concurrently, so state governments own their own hospitals, as federal government also owns its own hospitals. We know for a fact that many people prefer to work at the federal-owned institutions because they say that the wages there are better. That's what we have heard. Now, in the state-owned institutions, they might have the same structure, they might have the same organizational structure as well. When I mean structure, I meant in terms of buildings and what have you. The state government structure might even be grander. And the organizational structure might also be the same thing. But we know that the wages, some states are doing pretty okay, but we know that the wages are oftentimes never uniform. As long as they're meeting the minimum wage, can anybody say that they're going to force an employer to pay the same thing that the federal government pays?
These are statutory payments. When you engage someone to do his service or give you a service, you must have agreed on the terms and conditions. Every member of staff is employed through a letter, and your letter reads that this is what you will be paid at the end of the month.
Indeed.
The statutory payments, such as salaries, and then allowances that you earn for services that are done specially. Those are things that are uniform in both federal and state universities. So if you appoint a registrar today in federal university, you pay him the same salary that you pay a registrar who you will appoint in the state university. If you appoint a principal assistant registrar in a state university, he earns the same salary, or he should earn the same salary, because it is, we have what is called consolidated salary scale, Contis 2, and then with regards to the non-teaching staff, then CONWAS for the teaching staff. So it's something that is uniform. You do not say because education is on the concurrent list and therefore states can enact laws as it affects them. The university, you get your license from federal government, and you must have met all the statutory requirements of being licensed to operate. And that is what we are saying. Those state governors who now have made it like a competition to establish more universities when the existing ones are not funded properly should be called to order. And we also, in our meeting with government, drew the attention of NUC as the regulatory body. But we know their handicap because they cannot stop the establishment of universities. That was what we were meant to understand.
Why can't they stop it?
Because their law does not give them that power. So if the 774 local governments want to establish universities and they have made the minimum requirement of having the landmass, certain equipment, and so on, they can be given the license. NUC cannot stop them. That is what the law stands for now. But we have said that there is need to review these laws, and we are lobbying members of the National Assembly to put their, stamp their feet on the ground to ensure that universities are only established when they can be catered for. There is no need having so many universities, and the thing is becoming even ugly because you realize federal government even establishing 2 or more universities in a state when the one university is not even fully catered. I give you an example of Jigawa State. There's a federal university in Dutse, and then only recently another federal university is established within the same Jigawa State. And then already there is an existing state university, and that they have not even completely, admitted the number of students required even in one university. So if you are talking about lack of funds to take charge and pay for you know, the welfare of staff. Why are you creating and multiplying the problems?
Big question. Let's take this conversation to my colleagues in Lagos. I believe they have more questions for you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mark. Just a couple of clarifications to begin with, Mr. Ibrahim. You've talked about government responding. To be clear, what ministry, department, or agency of government are you talking about when you say you need feedback from government?
Well, because we are a labor union, all our cries naturally goes to the Ministry of Labor. Even the letter that we write government, for example, I give you a typical example. Because of the problems we have had and experienced under IPs, we have now prepared a new solution that will take care and pay our staff with its the university and its peculiarities. We call it the U3PS, which we intend to present to government if given date, because it's ready for presentation. This is a solution that we have written the Minister of Labor to intimate government that we are ready to help government by providing an enhanced technology solution.
Okay, well, Mr.
that
Ibrahim,
pay salaries and allowances of universities of staff, staff without problem.
That's noted, but you know, you are a labor union, but you are not employed as a labor union. You work with a university system supervised by the Ministry of Education. Does that in any way absolve the Ministry of Education from any responsibility in all these? Any conversations whatsoever with the Ministry of Education?
Now, when we write the Ministry of Labor as the conciliation ministry, what the Labor Ministry does is to invite our employers, that's the Federal Ministry of Education and the NUC, and then all other stakeholders. We have been meeting with these people. The issue is that all the meetings have not resulted into anything positive. And that is why we are complaining, and that is why we are feeling that things are not done rightly, and there is need for us to raise our voices.
But there was a meeting called by the Ministry of Education, I believe, recently, you know, talking about some review of all of these, some part of these arrangements, these agreements that you're talking about. Wasn't SSANU also invited to that conciliatory meeting?
Yes, that you are talking about the federal government renegotiation team that was recently reconstituted. Yes, even yesterday we had our first meeting with them.
Any progress on that? Shouldn't that be something that will say, okay, some conversations have started. SSANU shouldn't be talking about going on strike again. Work has begun.
The warning strike we have earmarked to go, if nothing is done by 27th, is not only about renegotiation. We just mentioned about the issue of non-payment of our minimum wage arrears and the allowances that were promised to us in October 2020, the sum of 30 billion naira, which less than 8 billion naira was released so far. So it's not only about renegotiation, and this renegotiation only kick-started yesterday, and even the first negotiation document that we had in 2009, 12 years down the ladder, less than 40% has been implemented.
You know, a lot of people might not know this, but apparently, aside ASU, which is in its 6th week of strike now, and we're still going to, about a month and a half to go, the NAAT is also on strike. That's the National Association of Academic Technologists. And now we're 4 days away from a possible SSANU-NASU strike. So essentially crippling everything university education related. And that's mind-boggling. But we're focusing on trying to resolve this, hopefully. And I'll take the example of the university in Ekwoma, which you mentioned, Ambrose Ali, regarding the payment for, I think, about a year. And I saw the letter you put out there to the Ministry of Labor, the Federal Ministry of Labor. And I just want to lean on the question Mark raised earlier, just to get clarity. Did you copy state governments in that letter? Because it's not just the federal government that needs to do something here. We also have the state government. So did you copy the state's Ministry of maybe Education, Labor as well, such that we can tackle those issues, you know, particularly?
Yeah, at the meeting we had in February 2021, a committee was set up in the office of the Minister of Labor to take care of issues surrounding state universities, with the NUC being mandated to ensure that proprietors of state universities are also brought to, you know, to the table. And at the level of the unions, we have written the Governors Forum, because the governors are the visitors to all the state universities, to intimate them. And all our communications, naturally, are copied to the Minister of Education, to the Permanent Secretary, to National Universities Commission, the Salaries and Wages Commission, where it pertains, you know, payment of salaries and so on. So none of the stakeholders is left out of this cycle.
But is the JAC still the lead negotiating body, even when it comes to states, or you'd allow the unions in those universities to handle the negotiation? How is that going to work?
Once agreements are reached at the federal level, what we do is we have branches in all the state universities. And what we do is that we write vice chancellors, who are the chief executives of such universities, and that these issues are tabled before the councils of such universities.
Are the negotiations at the state level happening at the federal level? The negotiations for the state universities, are they happening at the federal level?
We don't have a different level of negotiation for state and federal universities, because the university is universal by standards, and that in Nigeria is a National University Commission that regulates the activities of all Nigerian universities. So whatever that is agreed at the level of the federal government, it only follows that proprietors of state universities also key in, because we operate the same system and we have the same set of laws governing the affairs of such universities.
Okay, so give us an insight, if you can, comrade. So you had an MOU signed 2020, an MOA signed in 2021. What were the details, especially timelines, that you agreed on with government? Because you're accusing government of insincerity. So what were the timelines given, saying, okay, in 3 months, we're going to sort this? And how have those timelines perhaps been reneged upon? So tell us about the timelines given there.
Well, that is very interesting. The October 2020 meeting that we had a 6 weeks timeline. And if you count from October 2020 to date, you know that is way beyond even issues of weeks. Now, it runs into beyond months and is over a year. Then the reviewed MOA we had in February 2021 had a 2 weeks timeline. And today, we are in March 2022. Out of the 7 items listed, which I can quickly just tell you, inconsistencies in the payment system by IPPIS, non-payment of allowances, renegotiation with federal government, update on constitution of visitation panels, and then usurpation of duties of non-teaching staff by teaching staff, and then non-payment of retirement benefits. Out of these, only 2 have been attempted at. That is the issue of the reconstitution of the renegotiation team and the re-engagement with the unions, which we just did yesterday from February. Then the visitation panels that were constituted by government, and the exercise has taken place, but we are still yet to see the white paper. And without the white paper, it's just an exercise in futility, because we will not be able to know who erred and who is punished and who should be reprimanded.
Right. Well, Comrade Ibrahim, just before I toss this back to Mark, where I mentioned that ASU is on strike. I talked about NAT, and now SSANU and NASU gearing up for another strike. All of this happening at a time when, I mean, education is very important to any nation, more so now. We're just recovering from COVID-19. And if there's anything you need to work in a nation, especially if we're looking to the future, it's the education sector. should we just close our universities across board if it looks like we're not paying enough attention to it? Because if ASU is on strike, NAT is on strike, SSANU, nothing is literally happening. I imagine you're not even doing anything right now, now that you're still working. So should that be the conversation? Maybe we should close these universities and focus on, what is it, private universities, at least something that works for our children. What are your thoughts on this?
It's quite an unfortunate situation for every parent and Nigerians generally to begin to think about the situation or the plight of the university education in Nigeria. When you talk about closing down universities, that is something that is unimaginable. But anybody that will think towards that will naturally feel frustrated or is saying it out of frustration, and I can understand. However, government is the one that established such universities. And you know that in Nigeria, it is just a case of misplacement of priorities. It is not that government cannot run this system effectively, but if the right things are done, it is just like the question of this fuel scarcity. You cannot explain what is happening. 2 months almost down the line, we have been promised every day that queues will go off, petrol will be made available, diesel is not accessible. So many things are happening at the same time. Naturally, what is happening in this country is that there is need to reprioritize, the way we operate as a government. Education, healthcare system, these are things that you do not toil with. If you have established universities, you must be able to fund them. If you have employed staff, you should be able to pay them. If you are expecting that, people are complaining about half-baked graduates. Why won't you have half-baked graduates when you have not catered for the welfare and the well-being of those that mold the character and award these degrees to students? You expect teachers to go to class and teach, administrators to go and attend to these students, without being paid salaries? It cannot work. So government should, as a matter of urgency, reprioritize its needs and ensure that education is given its desired position, its strategic position. That is the only way that will solve this problem. And I'm happy with the current conversation or the latest conversation about people thinking about stopping public officers, public office holders from allowing their children to go to private universities or even going abroad to study. If you want to remain, from the councillor to the president, if you must contest election, then there should be a proviso that your children must attend public schools and your family and yourself must go to public health facility. This is the only solution to this problem as I see it now.
That conversation might be happening, but it's been kicked out of the National Assembly. The bill is not, it didn't scale, I think. It didn't get up to public hearing. So it put paid to that conversation becoming law, at least in this particular lifespan.
Nigerians can rise up to the occasion. Look at what is happening with the women.
That is exactly, that is not to rule it out completely. But I want to ask you, ASU currently is pushing that UTAS be considered the new payment system for universities. Would you be supporting ASU in that drive since you're also discontent with IPIS as a payment system for universities? We
don't know anything about UTAS as far as SSANU and NASU is concerned because we have not been consulted. And because of the problem that we have encountered with IPIS, we have also developed our own payment solution, which I now said the U3PS, University Peculiar Payroll and Payment System, which we have written government that we are ready to. You should also understand that payments, anything about payments in the universities is handled by our members.
Indeed.
We work in the bursary, and the ICT staff are also our members. So who is to develop a better and friendly and effective payment solution outside membership of SSANU and NASU? So if we were consulted by ASU, probably would have also given them our own suggestions. But because we don't know what they are doing, we have also developed our own, and we are presenting it to government anytime soon.
Okay, we'll see how the conversations eventually proceed, but we have to thank you for coming on the program this morning. Just to quickly add that we got in touch with the Ministry of Labour to see how they're responding to this strike threat, and they get back to us. We're hoping that perhaps they will be able to say what they're doing behind the scenes to try and ensure that SSANU and NASU do not go on strike. But we have been speaking with the president, with the national president of SSANU, who is Comrade Mohammed Ibrahim, as National President, Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities. We sincerely hope that you will get word out, and perhaps there'll be attention given to your complaints before the 27th of March. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Elite this morning.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a break at this point. We'll be back shortly to discuss other matters still on the economy. Please stay with us.